The hallway was too quiet. Monitors still blinked. 4 lines still dripped. But the usual rhythm of the ward, the soft footsteps, the low voices had stopped. A nurse stood alone near the central desk, reviewing a chart no one else seemed to care about. Then the first shout echoed from the far corridor. Security. Loud. Urgent. Wrong. A crash followed. Metal against tile. The nurse didn't flinch. He looked up once, slowly, as if confirming something he had already expected. Down the hall, boots thundered in black uniforms, weapons raised, voices sharp and overlapping. SWAT. They swept past him without a second glance. Just another nurse. Just another bystander. Clear the wing, one of them ordered, barely looking at him. The nurse nodded once, but didn't move. His eyes followed their formation, their spacing, their blind spots. Then, almost quietly, he stepped toward the corridor they had just ignored. And for the first time, something in his posture changed. Not panic. Not confusion. Control. That had already made their assumptions, and they were wrong. The night shift began the same way it always did, without announcement. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The air carried a sterile stillness, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the distant roll of a cart moving somewhere. Beyond the double doors, also the day staff had already left. Their voices, their urgency, their presence, all of it faded with the evening. What remained was quieter, slower, but not easier. The wing held a different kind of weight at night. Fewer hands, longer hours, problems that did not wait for morning. At the central station, a group of nurses exchanged brief updates, voices low, tired, but practiced. Names, conditions, medications spoken quickly, written faster. He stood just outside the circle. Listening, not interrupting. When a clipboard was handed to him, he accepted it with a small nod. No questions, no comments. Just acknowledgement. Room 312 needs monitoring, one nurse said, already turning away. He's been unstable. He glanced at the chart. Once. Understood. His voice was calm, even, almost, too quiet to register. No one waited for more. They never did. He moved through the corridor with steady, unhurried steps. Don't wasted motion. Room 312 came into view. The patient inside shifted slightly, restless in sleep. The monitor showed a pattern that most would consider acceptable. He stood there, for a moment longer than necessary, watching. The numbers. The breathing. The pauses between them. A slight irregularity. Subtle. Easy to miss. He adjusted the fourth flow without calling attention to it. Checked the oxygen line. Repositioned the patient's arm by a few inches. The monitor stabilized. He left without writing anything down. Further down the hall, a metal tray clattered. A younger nurse had dropped a set of instruments. Frustration written across her face. They never stocked this properly, she muttered, crouching to gather them. He was already there before she finished the sentence. He picked up the last piece and placed it neatly on the tray. You're short 2 syringes, he said quietly. She frowned. No, Then she checked again. There was a pause. Oh. He didn't respond. He was already walking away. At the far end of the wing, near a restricted access door, he stopped briefly. The keypad light blinked. Green. Unlocked. Was unusual. Not alarming. Not. Yet. He stood there for a second longer than anyone would expect a nurse to. Then he pressed the door gently until it latched fully into place. The click was soft, but deliberate. Back at the station, a senior doctor reviewed a file with visible impatience. Where's the updated chart for 318? He asked, not looking up. A nurse hesitated. I thought it was already. It wasn't. The doctor cut in. Before the tension could settle, the file was placed beside him. Neatly organized. Updated. He glanced at it, surprised. Who did this? No one answered. The nurse who had been speaking looked around briefly, then shrugged. Must have been done earlier. The doctor said nothing more. The hours moved forward. Quietly, he continued through his routine, but it never felt like routine. Every movement had intent. Every pause had reason. He adjusted things before they became problems. Closed doors, others left. Open. Noticed patterns no one tracked. A flickering light near the supply room. A delayed response on an intercom. A missing staff member who signed in but hadn't checked. A single patient. None of it demanded attention. Individually, it meant nothing. Together, he carried it with him. Around midnight, the hospital settled into its deepest silence, the kind that felt stable on the surface, but wasn't. He stood at the central desk again, reviewing another chart. To anyone watching, he looked exactly what they assumed he was. A quiet nurse. Efficient. Forgettable. Unremarkable. His eyes moved differently. Not just across paper, across the space. Tracking entrances, timing, footsteps, measuring distance without looking like he was measuring anything at all. Somewhere in the building, a radio crackled. Faint. Unclear. He didn't turn toward it, but he heard it. Every word. Or at least enough of them. Repeat. Not confirmed. Hold position. The voice cut out. No one else reacted. Why would they? It was just another broken transmission in a place full of them. He placed the chart down slowly. For a brief moment, he didn't move. Not frozen. Not uncertain. Just still. As if aligning something internally. Then he reached for a pen and adjusted a single note on the file. Small. Precise. Final. A nurse passed by him, yawning. "Quiet night," she said. He looked at her for a second. Not dismissive. Not agreeing. Just measuring the statement. "For now," he replied. She smiled faintly and kept walking. She didn't notice the way his attention had already shifted past her, down the corridor, towards something that hadn't happened yet. The wing remained calm. Orderly. Controlled. But the balance was thin, and he knew it. Not because of one thing, but because of all the small things no one else had added together. At the far end of the hallway, the same restricted door sat closed. This time, the handle moved slightly, barely visible, barely audible, but enough he saw it, and this time he didn't look away. The handle stopped moving, just as quietly as it had shifted. It settled back into place. From a distance, nothing looked different. The door remained closed. The hallway remained still, but he was already walking toward it. Not fast, not urgent, just direct. Halfway down the corridor, a voice echoed faintly from a ceiling speaker. "Incoming transfer delayed. Stand by for update." The message was routine, but the tone wasn't. It cut off too quickly. No confirmation, no follow-up. At the nurse station, no one reacted. Delays happened. Systems failed. The night shift adapted. They always did. He reached the door and stopped. Listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. No movement. Still, his hand didn't reach for the handle immediately. Instead, he glanced once at the keypad. The green light was gone. Now it blinked. Red. Locked. That, too, was normal. But the sequence wasn't. Behind him, a stretcher rolled past at a hurried pace. Two orderlies pushed it, their movements slightly off rhythm with each other. "Way," one of them said quickly. He stepped aside without hesitation, but his eyes followed the stretcher longer than necessary. The patient was covered to fully. No visible monitoring equipment. No line. No oxygen. That wasn't standard. Not for this wing. He said nothing. The door in front of him remained closed for now. He turned away, not dismissing it, just placing it aside. Back at the central station, the earlier quiet had shifted, not into chaos, but into something uneven. A nurse checked the same chart twice. Another tried calling a department that didn't answer. The senior doctor tapped his pen against the desk, waiting on a response that wasn't coming. "Radiology isn't picking up." Someone said they should be staffed. Another replied. No one raised their voice, but the rhythm was off. He stepped behind the desk and glanced at the call log. One line. Blink. Disconnected. No. TIMESTAMP. He pressed it once. Nothing. He didn't press again. A security radio crackled from the belt of a passing guard. "Unit 2, confirm status." Static followed. The guard frowned and tapped the device. "Repeat that," he said. No response. He kept walking. The nurse, who had dropped the tray earlier, approached the desk. Again. "Have you seen Dr. Karim?" she asked, scanning the area. "No," someone answered. "He signed in an hour ago." No one had seen him. The name lingered in the air for a second. Then it faded. There were always delays, always gaps. He turned slightly, looking down the corridor toward room 318. The door was open. The lights were on. But the bed inside was empty. That wasn't possible. Not without a discharge. Not without a transfer. Not without documentation. He walked toward it. Same pace. Same control. Inside the room, the sheets were disturbed. Not recently changed. Not cleanly removed. Just displaced. The monitor was off. Not unplugged. Switched off. That required intent. He scanned the corners of the room. No signs of struggle, no overturned equipment, no visible damage, but something had been removed or had left without process. From the hallway, a louder voice broke the stillness. Security to North Wing. Now, this time, people reacted. Nod with panic, but with attention. Heads turned. Conversations paused. He stepped back into the corridor. 2 security personnel moved quickly past him, their expressions tight. "What's going on?" a nurse asked. "Probably nothing," one of them replied. But he didn't slow down. The overhead lights flickered once. Brief. Almost. UNNOTICEABLE. Except it wasn't. Not here, not like that. He looked up for half a second. Then back down the hall. The restricted door was still closed, but now there was something different. A shadow at the base. Faint. MISALIGNED. With the lighting, he didn't approach it again, not yet. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the central station. But his path shifted slightly. Positioning. Not retreat. The senior doctor looked up as he returned. "Have you checked 318? He asked, irritated. "Yes," he replied, and a pause. Just long enough to choose the words. "It needs to be reviewed." The doctor sighed. "Everything needs to be reviewed tonight." He didn't argue. He didn't insist. He simply nodded. Across the station, the disconnected line blinked again. Once. Then went dark. Another announcement tried to come through the speaker system. "Please remain static." Cut it off. Silence followed. He stood still for a moment, not reacting outwardly, but everything about him had shifted inward. Faster calculations, clearer focus. The pieces were no longer separate. They were forming a pattern, and patterns meant direction. Down the corridor, the restricted door handle moved again. This time it didn't stop halfway. The handle turned fully. A soft mechanical click followed. Then the door opened slowly, just enough to break the seal. No alarm. No immediate response. For a fraction of a second, the hallway held its breath. Then, everything changed. A sharp tone burst through the overhead speakers. "Security alert. Initiating lockdown protocol. All staff remain in designated areas." The voice was automated. Controlled. But the timing too late. The door at the end of the corridor swung wider. A figure moved through it, not running. Not hesitating. Purposeful. Partially obscured by shadow. From the central station, only fragments were visible. A shoulder, a sleeve. Something held low and close to the body. "Did you hear that?" one nurse whispered. Another had already stepped back from the desk. "What's happening?" No one answered. He didn't wait for confirmation. He was already moving. Not toward the figure, but sideways, adjusting position, recentering himself within the wing. "Lock the patient rooms," a voice called out, but trying to take control. "Stay inside," someone else added. The instructions overlapped. Uncoordinated. A patient monitor began to spike. 312. He glanced once. Calculated. Kept moving. There were priorities. The figure at the far end of the hall stepped fully into the light. A man. Heavy jacket. Face partially concealed. In his hands. No mistaking it now. Weapon. Held low, but ready. A nurse. Gasped. The sound carried farther than she intended. The man's head turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough. "Down," he said quietly. To no one in particular. It wasn't fear in his voice. It was instruction. He reached the nearest patient room and stepped inside, closed the door. He told the patient's family. They hesitated. He didn't repeat himself. They moved. The door shut. Across the hall, another nurse fumbled with a lock. Her hands shook. It wouldn't turn. He stepped out, crossed the space in 3 strides, and secured it with a single motion. "Stay low," he said. She nodded, barely breathing. The overhead lights flickered again, longer this time, then stabilized. At the far end, the man moved forward. Slow steps. Scanning. Frantic. Not frantic. Not wild. Controlled. That made it worse. A security guard appeared from a side corridor. "Stop right there," he shouted. Too loud. Too exposed. The man turned fully now. The weapon came up, not fired, but aligned. "Back," the man said. Flat. Unemotional. The guard hesitated, just for a second, then took a step forward. He was already moving again, not toward the confrontation, but around it, using the layout, the blind angles. He passed behind a row of equipment carts, staying out of direct line of sight. Another announcement tried to push through. Full lockdown in effect. All personnel static swallowed the rest. The central station was emptying now. Some staff had retreated into rooms. Others stood frozen, unsure where to go. He reached the junction between two corridors and stopped, listened, counted. Distance, timing, movement, patterns. The man with the weapon hadn't fired. Not yet. That mattered. From behind him, footsteps approached quickly. To security personnel, breathing hard, radios crackling. "Where is he?" one asked. He didn't answer. Immediately, he looked at them once. Measured. Measured, then nodded toward the far corridor, moving slow, armed. That was enough. They rushed past him, weapons drawn. Focus forward. They didn't ask how he knew. He turned his attention back to the wing. Doors. Positions. Exposure. Points. That there were too many open paths. Too many unknowns. Room 318 still open. Still wrong. He moved toward it again. Inside. Nothing had changed. But now there was something else. A faint sound from the adjoining wall. Ventilation shaft. Movement. Not imagination. Not mechanical. Human. He stepped back out into the corridor. The pattern was clearer now. This wasn't random. It wasn't contained to one direction. The man in the hallway was only part of it. Loud shout echoed from the far end. "Drop it, now." Then a struggle. Not gunfire. Impact. Bodies colliding. He didn't look. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the nearest nurse still standing in the open. "Clear this section," he said. His voice hadn't changed. Still calm. Still quiet. But this time it carried. She hesitated. "Go," he added. That was enough. She moved. He stepped into the center of the corridor. Exposed. Not hidden. Exactly where he needed to be. The lockdown had begun. But it wasn't control. It was reaction. And reaction was already behind. From the ceiling above, the faint sound of movement continued. Parallel to the hallway. Tracking. He looked up once. Then forward again. Everything was shifting. Now. Faster. Closer. More dangerous. And still, no one was seeing the whole picture. At the far end of the wing, heavy boots thundered in. Louder than before. Faster. Faster. More organized. Voices followed. Sharp. Commanding. SWAT. Move aside. They entered with force. Weapons raised. Formation tight. Taking control. Past him without slowing. Without looking. Just another nurse in the way. He stepped aside. Let them move through. Watch their formation. Their angles. Their focus. Then his eyes shifted past them. To the areas they didn't cover. And for the first time the gap was no longer small. It was critical. The sound of boots filled the corridor. Heavy. Controlled. Fast. SWAT moved as a unit. Tight formation. Weapons raised. Eyes forward. Their presence cut through the confusion like a blade. Staff stepped back, instinctively, clearing space without being told. Twice. "North wing secured," one of them said into his radio copy. "Sweep and contain," came the reply. Their voices were sharp, efficient, certain, brought a kind of order to the chaos. But not control. He stood just off the main corridor as they passed. Unseen. Unquestioned. One operator brushed past his shoulder without slowing. "Clear the area," the man said, not looking at him. It wasn't a request. He nodded once, and stayed exactly where he was. Two SWAT officers broke off toward the patient rooms, checking doors, scanning corners, pulling staff into safer positions. Another team moved deeper down the hall toward the last known position of the armed man. Their movement was clean. Professional, but focused. Too focused. "Any staff still out here? Move to secured rooms," one of them called out. A nurse hurried past him, pulling a cart with her, nearly losing control of it in her rush. He steadied it with one hand as she passed. "Left side rooms," he said quietly. She didn't question it. She turned immediately. At the central station, a SWAT team leader stood reviewing a quick layout of the wing on a tablet. "Multiple corridors. Limited visibility," he said. "We isolate and push." Another officer nodded. "What about secondary access?" "Already covered," the leader replied. He didn't look up. From where he stood, the statement didn't hold. He knew it, but he didn't interrupt. Down the corridor, a loud thud echoed, followed by a sharp command. On the ground, a struggle, then silence. One of the officers spoke into his radio. "Suspect detained." "Repeat." "One suspect in custody." A brief pause. "Area, still not clear." Relief moved through the wing. Not complete, but enough to loosen tension. A few doors opened. Slightly. Voices returned in low murmurs. He didn't relax. Not even slightly. Above them, the faint sound in the ventilation shaft continued. Steady. Measured. Moving. Dash. His eyes tracked the ceiling line as he walked slowly along the corridor. No one else was looking. There, all attention remained at ground level, where the visible threat had been. Stay back, a SWAT officer said as he approached a blocked section of the hall. He stopped immediately. Compliant. Unremarkable. Dash. From that position, he could see the team regrouping. Weapons lowered slightly. Formation loosening. The kind of shift that comes when a threat is believed to be contained. It wasn't a nurse. Approached one of the officers. Is it over? She asked, her voice careful. Stay in your room, he replied, not answering the question. At the far end, the restrained suspect was being secured, face down, hands bound, breathing heavy, no weapon in reach. Everything pointed to resolution. The pattern still didn't. Close. Room 318. The empty bed. Disturbed sheets. The movement in the vents. The unsecured door. To many points. No connection visible, but they aligned. He stepped back from the corridor and moved toward a side access panel near the supply room. Unmarked. Usually ignored. He opened it just enough to check inside. Dark. But not empty. A faint scuff mark along the inner surface. Recent. Dash. He closed it again without a sound. Behind him, SWAT began repositioning. Sweep the remaining rooms. The leader ordered. We confirm before we release lockdown. Yes, sir. They moved again. Room to room. Systematic. Visible. Dash. But still not complete. He returned to the central station. The tablet with the floor layout was still active, left unattended for a moment. He glanced at it as he passed. 1 second. Enough. Dash. There. The secondary corridor. Marked, but not sealed. He kept walking. No pause. No indication he had seen anything at all. A SWAT officer turned toward him briefly. You seen anyone else moving through this area? He asked. The question was direct, but dismissive, expecting little. He met the officer's eyes for a moment. Then answered. Not through the main corridor. It was true, but incomplete. The officer nodded and turned away. That was enough for him. Across the wing, another door creaked open slightly. A patient's family member peered out, searching for reassurance. Stay inside, a voice ordered immediately. The door shut. Again, control was being enforced, but it was surface-level. Reactive. Based on what had already happened. He moved back toward the center of the wing, positioning again, not randomly, deliberately, above. The sound stopped. Abruptly. He froze for half a second. Not visibly, but internally, silence. In the vents was worse than movement. Then a soft metallic click echoed from somewhere behind the walls. Not a door. Not a lock. Something smaller. Closer. His eyes shifted toward the junction near room 318. This time, he didn't wait. The sound came again. Faint. Metal. Brushing against metal. Not loud enough to draw attention, but precise enough to matter. He moved toward the junction near room 318 without hesitation. Not fast. Not urgent. Just certain. Behind him, SWAT continued their sweep. Doors opened, cleared, closed. Voices echoed in short bursts. Clear move. Next room. They were doing everything right within the frame they were working in, but the frame was wrong. He reached the intersection and stopped just before the corner. Listened. No footsteps. No breathing, but something else. A shift in air pressure. Subtle. Moving from inside the walls toward the open corridor. He glanced once at the ceiling vent above room 318. Still. Too still. Then his eyes dropped to the base of the wall. A maintenance panel. Slightly misaligned, barely noticeable. That was the gap. He stepped past it without touching it. Didn't draw attention. Didn't crouch. Just kept walking. Across the corridor, a nurse stood frozen near a medication cart, unsure where to go. He reached her in 3 steps. Take the patients from 316 and 317, he said quietly. Move them to the West rooms. She blinked. But SWAT said, West rooms, he repeated. No explanation, no urgency in his tone, just direction. She nodded and moved. He turned back toward the panel. Still closed, still quiet, but now a faint shadow passed beneath. It confirmed. Down the main corridor, A SWAT officer called out, "Final rooms are clear." Another responded, "Copy." Preparing to lift partial lockdown. Too soon, he stepped toward the panel and stopped just short of it. Not touching, not exposing. From the far end, the team leader approached, scanning the hallway. "Everything looks contained," one officer said. The leader nodded slightly. "We'll confirm with a..." Sharp noise cut him off. Not from the corridor. From inside the wall. The leader turned instinctively toward the sound, but only for a moment. Then he dismissed it. "Probably structural," he said. "Focus on it's not structural." The words were quiet, but they carried. The leader looked at him for the first time. Really looked. Not as a nurse, but as a voice that had interrupted. "What did you say?" he asked. He didn't step forward. Didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his head slightly toward the panel. "Movement," he said. Inside a brief pause. The kind where decisions are made, or ignored. One of the officers shifted his stance. Uncertain. "You saying there's another suspect?" he asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he spoke with precision. Secondary access point wasn't sealed. The leader's expression tightened. "That area was cleared." "No," he said calmly. "It was. Checked." The distinction hung in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then the panel shifted. Just slightly. From the inside, every weapon in the corridor came up at once. "Back up," one officer snapped. Staff nearby scrambled, pulling back into rooms. Doors slamming shut. The leader stepped forward, weapon trained on the panel. "Show me your hands," he shouted. No response. The panel opened. Fast. A figure forced through low. Controlled. Already moving. Not panicked. Not disoriented. Prepared. The first officer to react fired but hesitated just enough to miss clean contact. The figure moved across the corridor, with speed that didn't match the space. Not while directed. He was already in motion. Not toward the center, but toward the edge, clearing the line of fire. "Hold your shots," the leader barked. Too many angles. Too many risks. The figure disappeared into the side corridor. Gone in seconds. Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. "Movie," the leader ordered. SWAT surged forward, turning into the side passage. He didn't follow. Instead, he stepped back, looked down the main corridor, then up. The vent above the junction opened. The first suspect had been visible. A distraction. This one wasn't meant to be seen. Behind him, a nurse cried out softly. "Are they gone?" He didn't answer, because the answer wasn't simple. SWAT's voices echoed faintly from the side corridor. "Lost visual. Check the exits. Seal the wing." But the wing was already compromised. He turned slowly, scanning the full layout again. Now with confirmation. Now, with clarity. 2 entry points. 2 movements. 2 overlapping. And only one of them had been addressed. The leader's voice came through the radio again. Sharper now. "All units. Second suspect confirmed. Repeat. Second suspect on the move. Lock it down." Too late for that. He stepped toward the center of the corridor again. Not rushing. Reacting. Repositioning. Because now the situation wasn't contained. It was unfolding. And they were still one step behind. At the far end of the wing, a door opened slowly. From the inside. No noise, no announcement. Just movement. He saw it, and this time there was no gap left to ignore. The door at the far end remained half open. No one from SWAT was covering it. Their focus had shifted, pulled toward the last known movement in the side corridor. The wrong direction. He didn't call out, didn't point, didn't try to redirect them. It wasn't time for that. And they wouldn't listen, not yet. So he moved. Not toward the door. Not directly. He angled across the corridor, passing the central station once more. His hand reached the edge of the desk, pulling a pen, a folded chart, and a small access badge without breaking stride. To anyone watching. Routine. To him, preparation. "Close every door on this side," he said quietly to the nearest nurse. She looked at him, shaken. SWAT said to stay close them, he repeated. No urgency in his tone. No explanation. She moved, and others followed her lead without being told. He stepped into room 316. The patient inside was awake now, breathing faster than before. Fear did that. "Listen to me," he said, voice steady. "We're moving you." No, I can't." "You can." He had already unlocked the bed, lowered the rails, checked the IV. All in one sequence. The patient's resistance faded, not because of the words, because of the certainty behind. them. He guided the bed into the hallway, keeping it close to the wall. Out of sight lines, another nurse met him halfway. "Where are we taking him?" "West rooms," he said. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. The movement began to spread. Quietly, without announcement. Patients shifted from exposed rooms to deeper sections of the wing. Doors closed. Lights dimmed. He didn't direct everyone. Just enough, just the right ones. At the far end, the open door hadn't moved. Still, waiting. He approached the supply room. Instead, entered. Closed the door behind him. Inside, shelves lined the walls. Equipment, fluids, sealed containers. Nothing designed for defense, but everything had structure. Weight. Purpose. He moved quickly now. Still, silent, still controlled. A rolling cot positioned near the entrance. Metal frame, slightly to block direct line of entry. 2 oxygen tanks, closer to the wall. Not as weapons. As obstacles. He adjusted the lighting, lowered it just enough to cast longer shadows into the corridor outside. Not darkness. Distortion. Then he stepped back out. The hallway felt different now. Not safer, but tighter, controlled at the far end. The door moved. Another inch. He stopped, watched, waited. Behind him, faint radio chatter from SWAT continued. Still no visual. Check the stairwell. Sealed the lower access points. They were chasing movement, not anticipating it. He turned slightly and tapped the badge against a side panel near the wall. A soft click. A secondary door down the corridor sealed. Shut. Quiet. Almost invisible. Containment. Not complete, but narrowing. Nurse approached him, again the same one from earlier. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice barely holding. He looked at her. Not dismissing, not comforting, just clear. "Stay with the patients," he said. "Keep them low, keep them quiet." She nodded. This time without hesitation. From the far end, a footstep, soft, measured. Inside the open doorway, the second suspect was there, not rushing. Not forcing entry. Observing, he stepped into the center of the corridor. Not fully exposed, but visible enough. The figure in the doorway paused. Their head tilted slightly, assessing. No words were exchanged. He didn't reach for anything. Didn't signal. Did. To escalate. Instead, shifted his stance. One step to the side. Just enough to block the clearest path. Forward. The figure moved. Slow. Testing. Sudden motion. Fast. Toward the corridor. He reacted instantly. Not by advancing, but by pulling the cart from the supply room across the path. Metal screeched against tile. The figure collided with it. Not fully. Stopped but slowed. That was enough. A door behind him opened. A nurse pulling a patient through. He stepped back immediately, shielding their movement. "Go," he said. They moved. The figure regained balance, adjusted direction, looking for a new path. But the corridor was no longer open, not clean. Not simple. Barriers. Closed doors, reduced visibility. Every step forward now cost time, and time was the one thing they no longer controlled. From behind, SWAT voices grew louder, closer. The figure heard it too. Their movement shifted. More urgent now, less controlled. A mistake. He didn't pursue, didn't engage. He stepped back. Again. Repositioning. Watching. The figure retreated slightly, then disappeared. Back through the doorway. Gone. For now. He stood still, breathing, steady. Eyes fixed on the opening. Behind him, SWAT turned the corner at full speed. Weapons raised. The leader demanded. He didn't point immediately. Instead, he spoke calmly, slowed, not stopped. The leader followed his gaze to the doorway. "Understood. Enough. Set perimeter," he ordered. Now, officers moved. Faster this time. Sharper. More alert. They were starting to see it, but not fully. Not yet. He stepped back into the shadow of the corridor. Position let them believe they were regaining control, but the structure of the situation had already changed. Not because of force, because of placement. And, for the first time, the wing wasn't reacting anymore. It was holding. The corridor held its shape. No movement from the far doorway. No sound from inside. SWAT formed a tight, controlled weapons trained on the opening. Flash and clear. One officer asked. The team leader didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved across the hallway. The barriers. The closed doors. The altered lighting. None of it had been there before. Not when they entered. Who said this? One of the officers muttered under his breath. No one responded. The leader's gaze shifted. It landed on him, standing just off center. Still, unarmed, watching. You. The leader said, stepping closer. What exactly did you do? He met his eyes. Direct. Bought time. A brief pause. Not resistance. Not agreement. Just recognition that the answer wasn't simple. Another officer spoke quickly into his radio. Thermals picking something up. Inside that room. Back wall. Movement confirmed. The leader turned back toward the doorway. Positions, he ordered. The team adjusted. Tighter. Angles. Better spacing. More deliberate now. But still forward-focused. He stepped slightly closer. Not enough to intrude. Enough to be heard. Back wall connects to service access, he said. The leader didn't look at him this time, but he listened. Single entry, the leader asked. No, he replied. 2. One behind the wall, one above. The words landed differently now. No longer dismissed. Why wasn't that in the layout? One officer said. It was, he answered. Just not marked as active. Silence followed. Not confusion. Adjustment. The leader made a decision. Split team, he said. One holds here. One checks the upper access. That was the first shift. Not in action. In thinking. 2 officers broke off immediately, moving toward the maintenance access further down the corridor. Faster, more aware. The leader remained at the front, focused on the doorway. You stay back, he said without turning. He didn't move. Inside the room, something shifted. A faint scrape. Closer now. Ready? One officer whispered. The leader nodded once. Hand raised, counting silently. Then a sudden crash from above. The ceiling panel just behind their formation dropped open. Too late. The second suspect came down fast behind the forward team. Weapon raised. Everything broke at once. Contact rear. Someone shouted. SWAT. Turned, but their formation had been built for the front. Split attention. Broken angles. The suspect moved quickly, using the confusion, not firing wildly, choosing position. He was already moving, not toward the suspect, but through the chaos. He stepped between 2 officers who had collided in their turn. Redirected, one with a firm push to the shoulder. Left, he said. Clear. Exact. The officer moved. Didn't question it. Another swung too wide. Losing coverage. Hold your line, he said. The correction came instantly. The leader turned, now. Fully. Seeing the breakdown. Something else. Him, not reacting. Directing. No badge. No weapon. Hesitation. Seal the rear, he said, not loudly, but with precision. 2 officers responded immediately, closing the angle, cutting off the suspect's movement path. The suspect adjusted, but slower now, contained above access. He added. The team that had moved earlier reached the maintenance point at the same time. Timing aligned. Pressure from both sides. The suspect fired once a sharp, controlled shot. It struck the wall. No one hit. Hold, the leader shouted. But the command overlapped. With his. Don't rush, he said. The difference was subtle, but it landed. The team slowed. Just enough. No wasted movement. No overextension. Suspect tried to reposition again, but the space was no longer open. Angles tightened. Options reduced. The corridor, once wide and exposed, was now controlled. Step by step, the suspect backed toward the wall, looking for the panel, the escape. But it was already sealed. He saw it. Adjusted. Too late. Now, the leader said. The team moved. Clean. Precise. The suspect was taken down. Controlled. Disarmed. Silence followed. Heavy. Complete. No. One moved for a moment. Then breathing returned. Suspects secured. One officer said into the radio. Voice steady, but different. Now, the leader lowered his weapon slowly. His eyes didn't leave him. Who are you? He asked. He didn't answer. He stepped back. Out of the center, the formation reassembled. Stronger. Now, more aware. But something had shifted. Not just in the situation, in them, because the gap they had missed hadn't been closed by force, had been closed by someone they had already dismissed. The corridor settled. Not fully, but enough. SWAT maintained position around both suspects, securing restraints, checking pulses, confirming control. Radios buzzed with updates. But the urgency had shifted. From panic to management. The leader stepped closer to him again. This time, slower, more deliberate. "Walk me through it," he said. Not an order, a request. He looked at the layout for a moment, then spoke. "Your perimeter assumed a single entry point," he said. "The secondary access was active, not structural." The leader listened, didn't interrupt. "You split your focus correctly," he continued, "but your angles were fixed. The movement wasn't pause." Then the leader nodded, slightly. He didn't expand further, not yet. Instead he stepped forward, not into the center, but into the space where decisions were made. "Reinforce that juncture," he said, pointing toward the intersection near room 318. "Rotate 2 units here, one at the ceiling access, one on the corridor line." The officer nearest him hesitated. Leader didn't do it. He said they moved. Immediately. For the first time the team followed instructions that didn't come from their own chain. Not because they were told to, but because they worked. He stepped back slightly, led them adjust. "Secondary access at West Corridor," he continued. "If there's one route active, there's a second." The leader's expression tightened. "You're saying there's still another entry point?" "Yes." A beat. Then the leader turned. "Check it," he ordered. 2 officers broke off. Again. The structure shifted. Not chaos. Not panic, but alignment. "Secure, patient. Movement first," he added. "You can't clear a corridor if the patients aren't stable." The leader looked at him again. Longer this time. "Who trained you?" he asked. He didn't answer immediately. Not deflection, not avoidance. Just silence. The question didn't matter. Not here, not now. Instead, he turned toward a nearby nurse. "Continue transferring rooms 316, 317. She nodded. "Already moving. Keep them off the main corridor," he added. She understood. That was enough. Behind them, the suspects were fully restrained now. One conscious, one not. The leader spoke into his radio. "Control status. Stable," came the reply. But something had changed. Not the threat. The approach. The team regrouped in a tighter formation. Rotations adjusted. Coverage improved. But this time they didn't assume the situation was fully contained. They listened. "Floor plan doesn't match," one officer said quietly, reviewing his tablet. "Yeah," another replied. "Some access points aren't listed." They looked up to him. He didn't react to it. Instead, he watched the corridor. The spaces. The shadows. Because something was still unresolved. Not in the room, but in the system. A final inconsistency. "Upper access confirmed," the leader asked over radio. "Checking," came the response. He turned slightly. Upward. Again. The vents. Still. 2 still. He stepped toward the nearest wall panel and placed his hand against it. Briefly. Listening. Feeling. Then he pulled his hand back. "Thermal variation," he said quietly. The leader turned. "Where?" He pointed not directly, but along the corridor. "Between rooms 314 and 316. There's a void behind the wall." "Confirmed?" the leader asked. "No," he said. "But consistent." The leader nodded once. That was enough. "Move to units," he said. "Check it." They moved. And for the first time there was no resistance. No sudden movement. No second suspect. But the structure of the wing had been exposed. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The team began securing every access point they had missed before. Checking panels, verifying walls. He watched all of it, but didn't lead it further. Because the command wasn't the goal. Control was. And control had already shifted, not loudly, but completely. The leader approached him one final time. "You saved this wing," he said. No ceremony, no exaggeration. Just fact. He didn't respond. Instead, he looked back down the corridor at the doors. The patients, the staff moving again, secured the remaining exits. He said. Direct. The leader nodded. And turned to relay the order. For a moment everything aligned, and then he stepped back. Out of the center. Out of the light. Back into the role he had started with. A nurse, nothing more. And that's exactly what he appeared to be. The wing had changed. Not in appearance, but in structure. Every corridor now had coverage. Every access point was being verified. SWAT units moved with a new awareness. Slower where needed, faster where it mattered. No one spoke loudly. No one rushed blindly. The chaos had been reduced, not eliminated. but contained. He stood near the central desk. Again, back where it began, watching, not directing, not intervening, just observing the flow of the operation. The leader walked the perimeter with 2 officers, checking each secured point. His movements were more measured now, less reactive. He stopped near room 318. The door was closed. The room cleared. Area secure, one officer said. The leader didn't respond immediately. He looked at the door, then at the wall beside it, then back at the door again. Confirmed the secondary access. He said. 2 officers moved to inspect the maintenance panel, carefully, methodically. He watched them from a distance. They found it, opened it, checked inside. Clear, one said. Good, the leader replied. But he didn't relax. Not fully, because he understood something now. The danger wasn't just the intruders. It was the gaps, the ones they hadn't seen, the ones someone else had. Across the wing, patients were being moved more carefully now. Rooms reorganized, staff reassigned. The system was stabilizing. He stepped into room 312 again. The patient was calmer now, monitors steady, breathing regulated. The adjustments from earlier were holding. He checked the 4-line, minor adjustment. Checked the monitor. Stable. He didn't say anything, just verified. That was enough. Outside the room, a SWAT officer paused briefly. He looked in, then looked at him. Everything okay? The officer asked. He nodded once. The officer hesitated, then moved on. No questions. The wing continued to stabilize. One of the officers approached the leader. Command wants a full report. The leader nodded. Get it ready. He stood at the edge of the station. Listening, watching. The report would tell a story. Of containment. Of response. Of success. But not of everything. Not of the missed gaps. Not of the adjustments made before the team arrived. Not of the quiet interventions. Those details would live elsewhere, or not at all. He stepped away from the station, back into the corridor. Everything was quieter now. Not silent, but stable. The overhead lights had stopped flickering. The radio chatter had slowed. The tension had settled, but not disappeared, because the reality of the situation remained. 2 suspects. Secured. 1 wing. Contained. A hospital still functioning. He walked toward the far end of the corridor, past the sealed doors, past the SWAT presence. No one stopped him. They no longer saw him as just background. But they also didn't ask him to stay. And he didn't offer. At the junction near room 318, he paused, looked once more at the ceiling vent. Still, then turned. The mission was over. For them, for him it had been over for some time. But he hadn't left. Because control doesn't end. When the threat is gone, it ends when everything is verified. And that process was still ongoing. In the distance, SWAT began preparing to withdraw. Teams rotated out, equipment checked. The leader approached him one final time. You'll be included in the report, he said. A statement, not a question. He didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, just keep the patients stable. The leader studied him for a moment, then nodded. And turned away. No more questions. No more demands. Just acknowledgement. As SWAT prepared to leave, the wing returned to its usual rhythm. Slow, controlled, familiar. Familiar. He returned to the central station, placed a chart back where it belonged, adjusted a monitor that didn't need adjusting. Small things, quiet things, the kind that mattered most, when no one was watching. The night shift would continue. The patients would rest. The staff would move forward, and the story would remain mostly unseen, except by those who had been there, and those who had seen just enough.
The wing settled back into its rhythm. Not the same as before, but close enough to feel normal again. Monitors beeped steadily. Doors opened and closed without urgency. Voices returned in soft tones, careful not to disturb the fragile calm. SWAT teams began to withdraw. Equipment checked. Positions released. Orders completed. The leader paused at the exit. He looked back one last time. Not at the team, but at the space they had just controlled. Then at him. He stood near the central desk, reviewing a chart. Calm. Unchanged. For a moment, the leader seemed like he might say something. But he didn't. Instead, he gave a small nod. Respect. Unspoken. Then turned and left with his team. The corridor slowly emptied. Footsteps faded. Radio chatter disappeared. Silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Just resolved. He placed the chart down. Adjusted the 4-stand beside a patient's bed. Checked the monitor one final time. Stable. Good. Then he turned and walked down the corridor. No one followed. No one stopped him. Because to everyone else, he was still just a nurse.